Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Media Matters by Anfield Index. There wasn't the result we wanted, was it, yesterday at Fulham? A 3-2 defeat at the Cottage for the Reds. Some thinking it denies the inevitable, some making out that the wheels have come off completely and it's like last season. Some may be in between. We'll see where the renowned and the respected David Lynch falls this morning as we walk through the Fulham game, things off the field, and look ahead to West Ham as the Reds finally go into one a week, which will be a little unusual. But David, we'll get straight into this. And yesterday, that Fulham defeat, 3-2. In the most simplistic terms we could say, was it just that bad? There was that many errors first half. No matter how well you played in the second, there was almost just too much to do.
Yeah, exactly that. If you give 3 goals away in the first half, you are going to have to play unbelievably well in the second to salvage anything from it. And to be fair, they actually almost did. I mean, that second half performance was very good and good enough to win a game. But it like I said, if you're 3 goals down, it's such a long way back, such a big mountain to climb. So Liverpool just absolutely gave themselves too much to do. And, the thing is, I think there's been a couple of first halves where that could have happened to them at some point this season. I mean, the fact that they've managed to delay it for kind of 26 games and go unbeaten shows you, how good they've been really, and kind of have a little bit of luck along the way also. But, it shows you how good this league is. And a side like Fulham can absolutely punish you if you do make mistakes. So as I say, it kind of shows how good Liverpool have been, that they've managed to avoid that. But obviously yesterday wasn't the day to avoid it. And they kind of, they made errors and they were fully punished by a Fulham side who finished well as well. So, once you 3-1 down, it's a long way back from there. And unfortunately, weren't able to just nick a point, which would have felt better. But, they have to take the defeat. And I suppose it's the first one in 26, so a little bit easier to take.
Yeah, a little bit, it's fair to say. And when you look at yesterday, because I've seen obviously various people in various comments on different bits, maybe spiraling a bit. So it's right to address the concern, shall we say, first of all. You look at that yesterday and 3 goals conceded in 14 minutes. It's fair to say the back 5 almost sort of put a blanket over that entire unit. It was as bad as it's been from them in the first half. There was errors galore, wasn't there?
Yeah, it's not even like you could kind of point it and say, there was a systemic issue or anything like that. It just seemed like all of them were kind of making different individual errors. I guess some of that was forced. That I didn't like how frequently kind of the ball was being cycled back to Kelleher on his left foot early in the game. That was clearly a tactic from Fulham to press and make sure that he couldn't get a kind of big kick on it and then try and pen Liverpool in from there. So maybe that was creating a little bit of nerves. But, the response shouldn't be that you make poor individual errors, and they just seem to be a series of those. And just kind of really messy. And we're just not used to that this season. Liverpool have been very good in terms of, not making errors that lead to shots. I saw a statistic from Andrew Beasley, who's obviously everyone will know is brilliant on the statistical side, that said Liverpool have averaged 0.6 opta-defined errors leading to shots per game this season, 0.6. And he made 3 in the first 33 minutes of yesterday's game. So that shows you kind of how unusual it was, the amount of errors. And, if you are making errors like that in Premier League games, they will get punished, and Fulham absolutely did that to the maximum as well. So you just can't kind of get away with that at this level, really. And Liverpool haven't had to this season. As I say, the errors they've largely kept them under wraps. But if you make a succession of errors like that, at some point someone's going to hurt you. And unfortunately, it happened yesterday. And Fulham completely punished it. Although I would say as well, there was some good finishing there from Fulham too. I think they score 3 goals off half an expected goal. That is very unusual. So a little bit of misfortune, but also poor play from Liverpool.
Yeah, indeed. That Mooney's, whatever you say, it was a great finish for the third. Although I did want to talk about individuals a little bit, because Alex Iwobi's goal, the more cynical side of me says Andy Robertson had a bet on Fulham going 2-1 up because he just seemed to make errors and it compounded and got worse and worse a little bit. But across the piece, especially for the third, Virgil van Dijk's been one of the two best players. He's the best centre-half in the world. You know, he's a candidate for player of the season. Let's not diminish anything at all. But he and Konate have really struggled the last few games, haven't they? And I don't know. It's almost trying to put your finger on it because they struggled against Beto, and people will say that's a physical forward. They struggled against Muniz yesterday, another physical forward. Is it that simple, or is it just they're not playing well at the moment?
I guess you've just got to kind of say that they're not playing well. I mean, there's probably nothing in that because I think, you know, how often have we seen down the last few years that Konate and Van Dijk can't deal with the physical stuff? I wouldn't say very often at all. They're both very capable in that regard. But they've just had a couple of bad games. I mean, you know, I've seen some of the reactions to it, some of the criticism of Van Dijk, and you're kind of like, well, you know, he is human. At some point, he's going to kind of have a game where it doesn't work for him. You know, similarly, I think Konate maybe hasn't, since he's come back from his injury, not been that top level he was beforehand. But again, he's a human being. These things happen. You know, we get too used to the idea that they should just be week in, week out, completely consistent. But it can't happen. You're going to have a stinker from time to time. And like I say, if it's punished in that way, which is the finishing from Fulham was unbelievable as well, and they get a deflection, you know, you've just got to kind of hold your hands up sometimes and say that that's football. Sometimes this will happen. I do wonder whether in the last couple of games, you know, I know certainly around the Everton game, and I guess it was similar around here. I'm not sure about down in London yesterday, but the wind has been a real factor recently. And I know this just from going to the match, but also, you know, taking my son out to kick a ball around. It's been really windy recently. You know, Jurgen Klopp always talked about that a lot, didn't he? And every time it's kind of been windy at Anfield, I've noticed that the centre-halves seem to find it harder in, you know, when the ball's getting a bit chaotic and it's up in the air. So, you know, I'm just looking for kind of mitigating factors in this because it's so unusual that they would play poorly in the way that they did. But, you know, also it's sometimes, look, it can happen. And I think, you know, we've got to just accept that's the case sometimes. And, you know, if it's going to happen, if it, you know, it's going to be your second defeat of the league season, and when you're 11 points clear, then I think that's far easier to kind of accept.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, you know, that third one is a special touch by Muniz. And I'm trying not to be hypercritical, but I can't step away from it at all with the 3 goals. It's not almost being derogatory of Kelleher, I don't think, but I'd back Alisson to save one of those, would you?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Kelleher is a fantastic keeper. Liverpool are going to earn a lot of money for him. And he's won trophies for Liverpool. So, you know, his standing, there's no question about that. But there is a little bit of a gap, isn't there? There's a reason Alisson is clearly Liverpool's first choice. And, you know, you'd argue that he's the best goalkeeper in the world because he pulls off some saves sometimes that other goalkeepers don't. So you would think, you know, like I say, for them to score 3 from half an expected goal, maybe Alisson digs you out in one of those situations. And if it is 2-1, then Liverpool can get something out of the game. Unfortunately, it goes to 3-1. But yeah, I do think you kind of saw the difference in level there. But to be fair to Kelleher, you haven't seen that. You know, he's played a lot of games this season. You haven't seen that gap very frequently this season. He's done well to kind of mask that. But sometimes it's going to hurt you. And I'd agree with that. I think he would probably save at least one of them. Which one is hard to say, but I think he probably would have, you know, he got a hand somehow to one of them.
Yeah, football does have those sliding door moments, but there's concerns, people, but it's not burn everything down just yet. And on the other side, there is things to talk about as well that are real positives. I thought Alexis McAllister again was brilliant, and what a strike that was, by the way.
Yeah, really, really good strike. I mean, I thought both midfielders, those two who were in the kind of deeper line positions, played really well yesterday. Which again, you know, I think people get a bit, like I say, you know, you have a first half where you make so many individual errors at the back, and then kind of get punished by some really good finishing, and everyone thinks, well, then. Okay, well, the whole performance has to be full of absolute nonsense and it was all terrible. But I just don't think that was the case. I think, you know, if Fulham's finishing had been slightly off, or you did have Alisson there to save a couple of those, people would be more kind of, you know, amenable to the idea of taking positives from the game. And they were there regardless. I mean, I've seen a lot of criticism of Gravenberch's performance, which I find, I sometimes wonder, you know, are we all watching the same football match? Because I just think people go into it with a preconceived idea of who they want to play poorly. And then, if the result isn't right, then okay, well, I can blame the player that I think is playing poorly at the moment, or, this obsession about kind of Gravenberch's fatigue or whatever. I think the last two, after he's had a little break in the international break, I think he's looked right back to his best. He started winning the majority of his ground duels again, which has been a big factor in his performances this season. It's been why he's been so good. He used the ball pretty well. A couple of times he's shimmying away from players. I thought both those midfielders played well. And as you say, McAllister, brilliant goal. I thought generally a very good performance as well. So there were positives there, definitely. And I thought the midfielders were absolutely part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the best midfielder in the league, he will be crucial if we're going to get the key results. And the other real set of positives, probably it shows that in the 72nd minute, they combine from the goal, a Conor Bradley charging run, a lovely pass inside, and Luis Diaz finishes. I mean, both of those off the bench, they were positives, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, kind of the fact that kind of people are screaming at Arne Slot to change things up. You got to change the team. He changed it yesterday, put Gakpo in, and I thought Gakpo was terrible. So maybe you should have stuck with Diaz on that one and would have got a better performance. But I thought, Diaz was very good when he came on. He changed things. I thought Conor Bradley showed that. I think Trent's been a big miss in these last few games. I think Liverpool's creativity has dipped. Their inability to progress the ball has been a real factor in all of the games. But I also think what you saw was that it's not just that they've been missing Trent, and it's not going to just definitely be like this next season if he's not there. I think what it's shown is they've been missing an orthodox right back. When Quanta's there, you can't get the ball forward as well. And Curtis Jones is a very good player, but he's not necessarily massively progressive. He's someone who keeps the ball for you when he's in central areas and does similar things at right back. I mean, for example, against Everton, he completes more passes than anybody else, or the highest percentage of anyone who plays over a half. So it shows you he's someone who retains the ball, not someone who fires it in and gets you into the final third. So that's something Liverpool have missed from right back. And Conor Bradley can't pass like Trent. He doesn't progress the ball in that way, but he dribbles and he runs and he's powerful through the middle. That's his way of influencing the game and getting the ball forward. And instantly when he came on yesterday, you saw Liverpool were better in that regard. And also finally, all of a sudden, Mo Salah's in the game. And I think that's a really interesting thing. I think that the lack of an orthodox right back there steaming down the outside has had a real impact on Salah's performances recently. But Bradley was very good when he came on. And I think, big end to the season for him because Trent's still going to be out for a while. So hopefully he can really help things now he's back.
Yeah, and you mentioned on a slot there and LAPS saying, what does Chiesa have to do to get more than a few minutes? And Slot's decisions yesterday, I mean, it probably regrets now putting Cody Gakpo in starting, no doubts about it. But on a positive nature, we always look to him to change it second half, and he did. The subs made a big difference. Do you think at the end, though, I know this sounds weird, was it almost one sub too many? Because we were on top, and then Robertson comes off, Chiesa comes on, and he drops Bradley into that back three, and it kind of didn't quite work at the end from there, did it?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it just kind of killed any momentum Liverpool had, because I think what he was thinking is that Fulham had kind of gone into a back five. So, okay, if they've got numbers there, we match them for numbers up there. But what Liverpool ended up doing there is that Fulham pressed a bit harder then again in the kind of final 10 minutes. And Liverpool, they couldn't progress the ball. And because they didn't have numbers at the back to create sort of numerical superiority to get the ball out and get it into the final third, they struggled to create chances. So I would agree with that. I do think it was probably one sub too far. And maybe you could have thought about, is it Chiesa for Salah instead? It's something like that. But again, that's a tough call to make, isn't it? Because if you want the ball to fall to anyone in the last seconds of the game, it's surely Mo Salah. So it's a tough one. And it's easy for us to say from the outside that he should have done that. But yeah, it's I thought, around the kind of subs, I thought he made great decisions up to a point. I mean, ideally, you'd like them to not be in that position where he needs to do that. And that has been a theme this season, but he's generally got that right. So I don't think we can be overly critical. And just on the Chiesa point, by the way, obviously, there's a real clamour for him at the moment. And I kind of understand it on the basis, and we've spoken about this, that, nobody's nailed down that central spot, have they? And I think, Jota, Nunes, Diaz, you're not buzzing to see kind of any of them starting there and thinking that you're going to get an absolutely world-class performance from any of them, really. Although I thought Jota was good in the derby. Is this really the time where you're looking at the manager and thinking, let's just try this out now? I'm just not sure it is. Liverpool want to get this league won as soon as possible. And, we forget that outside of the matches, okay, Chiesa has been bright when he came on in the final. Thought he was kind of bright yesterday. But
yeah,
he's coming on in games where Liverpool are throwing everything at it. It's absolutely chaotic. They're chasing the game. So there are going to be more chances there to get shots, to influence the game. And we can't boil down what's happening at a football club and the selection decisions that are being made to just the 90 minutes that we see every weekend. There's training every single day, and they're looking at the players and seeing who's training better, who's finishing better. I've seen calls for Salah to be dropped on the basis of performances. It's like it would be madness if the manager did that. He's seeing this guy every day in training, seeing how good he is. He just can't do that. So I think people are going to be disappointed if they expect Chiesa to start any of the coming games, to be honest. But I think that's the right decision as well. As much as I would like to see, I'd like to see Liverpool maybe get it won and then have a look at him in that central position. But I just don't think the manager can afford to risk that now, because if it goes horribly wrong, you're in a position where you've wasted another game, and maybe Arsenal get closer or what. You just don't want to do that. You just want to get this won. And the team that's won so many games up to this point of the season is probably the one he's going to stick with.
Yeah, it is hard to see too much rotation. I mean, you mentioned Chiesa there. It was a half chance, I think he would say, like the half volley, he controlled it well. But even yesterday, and I know football's always about sliding door moments, and it's easy to go shoulda, woulda, coulda. But at the same time, Jota has a great chance second half, doesn't he? When Salah slips him in one-on-one, Mo should really bury that cross from Diaz. Elliott, I do think he should have scored it. It's, if anyone had to put him or Salah in that position, almost tries to put too much on it. Chiesa, the half chance as well. There were chances galore, weren't they? It could have been a different script second half.
This is it. I mean, if Liverpool had finished as Fulham did in terms of just banging everything into the back of the net, then, they get something out of the game. So, like I say, there's the real negatives there in terms of the errors at the back and the issues that Liverpool were having there. But also, this is a game they could have quite easily won. Never if Fulham finished slightly less brilliantly, if Liverpool put the great chances that they had away, and they were good chances, a lot of them, they could have got something. They could have got something anyway. It could have easily finished 3-3, couldn't it? So yeah, it's just one of those. That's football, isn't it? I mean, you go 26 games in the league and not falling on the wrong side of these margins. At some point, it's going to get you. And I kind of wish I'd I don't know, put something on social media about this, or we'd have spoken about it more extensively on the podcast. In that, I've kind of thought for a while they're probably going to lose one more of these games. It's going to happen somewhere. Things are going to kind of conspire against them. They're going to come up against a hot finishing streak. They're going to make some mistakes that they can't come back from. It's inevitable that these kind of things happen. So, we shouldn't read way too much into what happened yesterday. I don't think. It's sometimes football happens to you, and it's generally a low scoring sport where things can happen and go wrong for you. So, even if you kind of have a lot of positives in the game, you can still lose. So, you just got to kind of just take it on the chin sometimes. I think yesterday was very much one of those. Yeah,
indeed. And talking about extreme reaction, I can see people in the chat panel questioning slot and all different types of things. Like, honestly, it's Monday morning. It's early, people. We're going to win the league. Let's just have a bit of perspective on this. And ultimately, I mean, I've got it up on the screen there. We are 11 points clear still in the league. There's 7 left to play. You would literally, most of the time, for a lot of people, would almost handpick West Ham as one of the 5 you'd want to play at home in the next game as well. Into that, David, I mean, with all those factors and 1 game a week, that might actually suit a little bit now going forward, might it?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you've seen, I think, a recovery from Gravenberch in terms of he's the only one I would assign any fatigue to this season. I think that's kind of just to quickly touch on that. I think that's an unbelievable narrative that people are seizing on. You know, every poor result or poor performance, fatigue. It's fatigue. These players are tired, and yet they kind of look at Arsenal getting the points tallies they have in the last couple of seasons with effectively putting out the same 11 and think, well, that's been a real positive for them. That's the reason they're able to do it. They've been so lucky with injuries, and then Liverpool have a season like that, and it's like everybody's knackered. It's impossible for the players to get through this workload, even though many of them have season upon season. And by the way, you know, I think there's this idea that kind of Jurgen Klopp rotated loads. He wasn't picking Bobby Clark and Joe Gomez in midfield at Nottingham Forest last season on the basis that he wanted to. He didn't rotate that much. When he had a fit 11 and it wasn't enough really that happened to him, he generally picked the same team. So this is not anything new, and this is not a fatigue team. Sometimes results can happen to you that you don't want to happen, but it doesn't have to always be fatigue. So, you know, I want to kind of shut that down. Equally, I think, you know, not having midweek weekend, particularly when you're playing against sides who aren't playing midweek a lot of the time. So, you know, say Liverpool had Champions League in the build-up to playing West Ham, that would have been more difficult for them because West Ham wouldn't have had that commitment. So it does level the playing field in terms of that, and that is handy. And so that should make things a little bit easier in the run-in. Also gives them time to do more kind of tactical preparation, do things, work things on the training ground, work on ideas, maybe come up with some set pieces so they might actually start scoring those. That would be nice. So, it can be really, really useful.
Yeah, I am. I'm struggling with the whole it's fatigue. It does feel like the go-to at the moment. As soon as it goes wrong, the fatigue, and I'm not saying there's zero merit in that. I think we've discussed it. A bit more rotation of the rest of Gravenberch would be useful. I do wonder a little bit, like you said, about Konate at the moment, like especially when he did that silly pirouette and nearly cost us a goal. He just looks a bit of a shadow of himself, whatever that is. That comes into my mind as well. But
sorry, go on, sorry.
But I've got to say this. If we were that fatigued, how come from about the 56th minute till the 75th, 76th with the final stop, was it all us? I think we made like 8 chances, someone said, in that time. And probably the one thing, I know football's that sliding doors, but probably Slot wouldn't quite make that final change or make a different one because there was a 22, 25-minute period. It was all us. We were running harder. We were winning everything. It's like we finally turned up. If you are fatigued and tired, how are you doing that?
Absolutely bang on, Dave. It's spot on, really. I mean, that's it. Liverpool got stronger in the game. They got much stronger in the game. So that's not the efforts of a fatigue side. And you can talk about, they brought the substitutes on, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, only so many. It's not like, you know, Gravenberch was still there, the one who everyone's obsessed with being tired, and Van Dijk was there, and he's played a lot of games. And, you know, there were a lot of players on that pitch who, in theory, should be fatigued, but got stronger as the game wore on. So I don't understand this obsession with it. It's become it's just a nonsense theory, really. And I think if you spoke to anyone who was in and around the club about this, that it's just being massively, massively overplayed. And, you know, it fatigues the go-to. Okay, so why did they lose to Nottingham Forest early in the season? Was that fatigue? Were they tired then in the third, fourth game of the season? Was it?
Yeah.
You know, it's just the go-to every time now. Whereas because nobody can conceive that players can sometimes have dips in form or issues or just not play well, or the opposition can finish every chance, or, you know, football happens. And the fact that Liverpool have avoided it for so long does not mean now when things start to, when they can't avoid it, that it has to be fatigue now. I just think it's absolute nonsense. You know, I think, do you know what I think primarily drives it is that if people can say it's fatigue, they can say, well, the squad isn't big enough, or they need to sign more players. I'm telling you now, the squad will not be any bigger next season. It won't be bigger. It will be one in, one out. So if this is fatigue, then they're going to have fatigue next season as well. I just think people aren't used to the idea that, like, you know, players can just play poorly. Players can have little bits of off form. Konate can be out of form. It can happen. You know, Mo Salah can struggle because he doesn't have Trent firing the ball every 3 minutes or whatever. You know, football happens. It's not always fatigue. This mad obsession with it is just an attempt, I think, and this is 99% of football analysis, and I include my own in this, by the way, is trying to apply what limited knowledge we have of what's going on to an outcome that we can't control at all. So Liverpool lose, yeah, it's got to be fatigue, because this is a pet theory that I've got in my head. I just think it's absolute nonsense, to be honest.
Well, it looks like we've not won over the chat panel on the fatigue talk, but thank you for listening to our TED talk on non-fatigue there. But it is what it is, a 3-2 defeat. We move on to the next one. And before we get on to the next one, we always ask you about the latest, the off-the-field stuff, the latest contract dramas. And interestingly enough, names are still firing fast. And it is a case of January specifically linking back that probably a name that came out there, Victor Osimhen. And he was written about when it talked around strikers that Liverpool could be looking at this summer. Victor Osimhen, David, are you shooting this one down like all the others, do you reckon?
Well, I wouldn't doubt for a second, by the way, that he's someone we're keeping an eye on. Great goal record, decent age. You know, I think he would work in the Premier League, absolutely. But I'm just a little bit, you know, there was all the talk, wasn't there, about his kind of wage demands, and you know, if they are outrageous, I just don't know how Liverpool can kind of get there if that is the case. You know, maybe he's lowered his wage demands. You know, maybe a season in Turkey has made him kind of think, well, you know, I do want to get this move. I want to get there. You know, I want to get to the Premier League, and obviously a move to Liverpool would be very attractive. So maybe that would have changed things. But if his wage demands haven't changed, then I just, you know, it's just not very Liverpool, is it, to do this? So, you know, it's not one I kind of completely rule out, but I think there would have to be some shift on his side to make that happen.
Even with a year left to go on his deal, it's just the only thing we look at the moment, and it was something I want to ask you about, with the forwards, that elite forwards are hard to come by, goal scorers anyway in that regard. And the ones we've been linked with, like an Isak and Alvarez, the money being asked for them is absolutely exorbitant. But with a year left to go on his deal, do you think if it was something around, I don't know, 50, 60 million, even if it is big wages for someone who knows how to score goals and has a proven track record in multiple leagues, it could be something that could tempt them?
Yeah, I think if it fee wise, I don't question that. It's just that kind of wage thing, you know, is the real issue around it. I think fee wise, it would be reasonable, and you know, you're looking out there on the market for kind of number nines who might be there, might be available for Liverpool, because they're definitely going to sign one this summer because Nunez will leave. Then, you know, there are question marks over a few of them, aren't there? You know, you look at Jota, for example, and you're like, well, you know, he scored in the Championship, yes. He scored in Portugal, yes, but can that translate to the Premier League? That's you know, he scores a lot of penalties. So will his non-penalty goals, will they translate? You know, that's a big question. And then, you know, some of the other names that are being bandied around as well. I think, you know, Isak, probably ungettable. Ekitike, we've seen players score in the Bundesliga and then maybe not be able to translate that to the Premier League. Physically, is he quite there in terms of holding off defenders? So there's just loads and loads of question marks over a lot of them. And I think Osimhen is possibly closer to kind of one where you'd say he probably would score goals. He looks a safer bet. So, you know, I don't doubt really that if Liverpool think they could do it at reasonable wages and reasonable transfer fee, that they'd be kind of, you know, he'd at least be on the list. But, you know, it is just those wages if they kind of come to a more reasonable level, or a level that Liverpool are willing to get to.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. And yeah, all the package, and people will mention injuries as they're doing in the chat panel as well. And not a forward, but an attacking player, another name that one, I've got to be honest, really intrigues me. Been mentioned a few times, but stories around Antoine Semenyo, the Bournemouth winger, all the physical attributes I think are superb. Do you think he is one, or have you heard anything on him at all?
Yeah, I think he'll be liked. Again, he's kind of, you know, I think every player who's kind of performing as he is in the Premier League, so they've got that experience. He's around that age. He's got great physical quality and quality of his feet. There's just an awful lot to like about him. So, you know, he again, you know, hearing that he's kind of someone who's being linked and they kind of like that doesn't surprise me at all. I think he's a really good player, and I think he's one of those who's kind of on the cusp of really exploding and could be a top player for a top club. He's got very much kind of Sadio Mane vibes to me. So wouldn't be surprised at all if he's on the list. But again, a lot of that it counts on kind of, is Luis Diaz going to leave, and that is a possibility. But I'm sure if Luis Diaz did leave, he'd be in the mix. He's a player who kind of ticks a lot of boxes, definitely.
Kind of has that feeling, Semenyo, will be on the list, but probably not right at the top of it, but definitely in the mix, as you said. And maybe this one is an ultimate manifestation, but people took a lot of what David Ornstein said in his Q&A the other day and mentioned that Morgan Rogers has got a lot of admirers in the big boys in the Premier League. And Kamara there as well mentioned Villa's financial issues. I mean, there's talk they're even going to sell their women's team to themselves to sort of balance the books a little bit as well. Morgan Rogers, for me, is a superstar in the making. I'm probably certain this is going to be a no, but can't see it, not heard anything.
No, not to be honest. And I'm a little bit skeptical about this one just because they've kind of got Szoboszlai and Elliott in that position at the moment. So, say Elliott could leave, by the way, that's very much a possibility. But are you kind of signing someone who bumps Szoboszlai out the team, or are you thinking that you can develop him and get a little bit more out of him? I'm not so sure really with that one. I think he's a fantastic player, but I'm not massively convinced that kind of position for me at the moment is number one priority coming into this summer. I mean, there's so much else to do, isn't there, really? I mean, they're going to need a left back. They're going to need a Joe Gomez replacement. They're looking like they're going to need a Trent replacement. They're looking like, could they need a Salah replacement? Hopefully not. But same with Van Dijk, obviously. Definitely Núñez replacement, possibly a Diaz. There's just so much there. And that's before, you'd almost think that all those issues that are going to come up this summer are much bigger problems and things that Liverpool have to solve before they start saying, we can upgrade on Szoboszlai. And, I think people could argue that possibly they could do. And I wouldn't disagree with that argument, maybe. And maybe that's an area Liverpool could strengthen. But they've got so much else to do that for me are further up the priority list that, I'm not sure they would get into kind of the bidding war around Morgan Rogers, because if he does become available, I expect that's what it will be, because he's an absolutely fantastic player. He's English as well, homegrown, so that will bump his fee up. So, there's a lot more to do, I think, before they kind of start looking at that position.
He has played 15 on the left this season, or coming in from. I honestly think he could be a superstar, but I can't ignore the facts around all those things you said as well. And the other thing that people pounced on, I've got to be honest, I didn't like this at all, what David Ornstein said. And it's not that he's confirming anything, but he was asked in his Q&A, are Liverpool target any midfielders? And if so, what names have been floating about? And he said, doesn't seem to be a department at the top of the priority list. And if that's the case, you can understand why. Zubimendi was used as a market opportunity, and that's why they didn't pivot to another target, he who they wanted. And with, Gravenberch, everyone else's outstanding season, it doesn't look like it. I'm a bit worried by that. I mean, I hope that's false, because we've talked about this. It's absolutely nothing new. That midfield right now has done very well, but it lacks physicality. It really does. And sometimes a bit of cuteness, to get the ball through as well. If there wasn't a bit of a change in the midfield, combined with the fact, I've got to be honest, Arne Slot seems to trust four of them pretty much as well. Surely a midfielder's got to come in.
Yeah, I think it's a possibility, but I'd agree with what David's saying there, in that, and I think again we've kind of discussed this previously, in that I don't think it's going to be Carlos Baleba. I don't think it's going to be someone he's signing who's like a nailed-on starter. I think what's going to happen is, there's a very big chance that Endo leaves, and you need to bring someone in to kind of supplement that. To come and take his minutes up, but also probably be a bit closer to the competition and make it a genuine rotation. But I don't think it's going to be a superstar. I think it could be someone who brings some more physical qualities and is a bit better on the ball than an Endo. But I don't, in terms of it being a priority, I'd agree with that. I think again, like I said about, attacking midfield, I think similarly for midfield in general, I think there are just bigger issues in this team that need sorting first, and a rotational midfielder is not kind of in your top three issues that are coming into this summer for me, really, that Liverpool have to solve. So I think it's something they could but possibly will, because I think Endo will leave and want more minutes. But but it's not, like I say, I don't think it's a top 3 issue, and I don't think the player they're going to sign is going to be a nailed on starter to suddenly bench a McAllister or a Szoboszlai or a Gravenberch, to be honest. I think the ideal would be that it's someone who can kind of play a few of the positions and can come in and out, but he's a bit closer to what the manager wants than what he's getting from Endo at the moment. So I kind of agree with that, really. And I just don't think we've seen enough this season to think it should be the number one issue. I think, if you can add physicality with that rotation option, fantastic. And I think it improves Liverpool. But a kind of a starting nailed on midfielder, I can't really kind of see that. I can't see any of this 3 getting completely pushed out the side by anyone.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see, people. The transfer talk, all we can pretty much lead into is, I think we're all going to be surprised if it isn't a busy summer, departures and incomings. Either way, we'll have to see where it's starters, squad players, or what. Time will tell on that one. And the final segment, weird to almost talk about one a week, and the next game is West Ham at home. So I do want to focus into that and the coming week. The question I did want to ask you, I almost just expected Alisson to be in the sticks because it feels like an eternity since that concussion injury for Brazil. Is there any update around that? Is there any? Obviously, his health's more important than anything, but is there anything to be concerned at all about?
Yeah, I 100% would expect him back for the next game now. I guess he just kind of failed the protocols, but there's going to be so much time now for the coming game that I would expect him to pass them and enough time to fall within the Premier League rules, etc. So it's just one of those. I was a little bit surprised by that. I think it cost Liverpool in the end as well. But now, of course, there's a full week till the next game, so plenty of time to get him back. And you'd rather, I guess, than be very careful around these concussions. It can be quite dangerous. So it will be good to have him back. And I'd be amazed if he's not in the sticks against West Ham.
Yeah, fingers crossed on that, because he does make all the difference. And I suppose we touched upon it because people even now still like Chiesa in, Elliott get more minutes. Slot is going to play what he sees as the strongest team, isn't he, until the job is done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even Gakpo's performance against Fulham, I think, will discourage him from maybe using him for the next couple of games or so. So I think it's going to be a really settled 11. It is the right approach at the end of the day. I don't want to see Chiesa come in for the first hour against West Ham and maybe get eaten up and maybe struggle because the game's not open and he can't. I just don't. There's just no point in that experiment at this point in time. Liverpool need to get this league wrapped up as soon as possible, and I'm pretty sure they will. I mean, look again. You have to reiterate that we're talking about a second league defeat in 20. The entire season thus far, and first defeat in 26 games. So I just don't think we should go over the top about this, or anyone be worried that the league's not going to be won or whatnot. They've got some really kind fixtures coming up, and it could be won by the end of this run. So, particularly the home games, you really fancy them to win. So, I think it's going to be a settled 11, and I'm sure we'll see some pretty good performances as well.
And I mean, we talked about players who could be returning. We mentioned Alisson being a big boost. Is the fact that Connor Bradley is back, it will mean there's a natural right back, so we can play more of the system we want to. It will be a knock-on effect that then links to the midfield, the rest of the defence, and also it helps Mo Salah. That just almost, can that be a real catalyst for Liverpool towards the end?
Yeah, I think it's going to make Liverpool better, 100%. You can't replace Trent, but Bradley gives you so much more than Jones or Quansah do in that position. Those little central runs that he, powerfully bursting through the middle, having genuine help for Salah around that outside, dragging players away, and someone that the teams have to actually think about doing that and being worried about. So I think he'll make a real difference to Liverpool, and I think I think he will be the one now. He's back in the squad. He got some minutes yesterday. He'll have some training under his belt by the time the West Ham games comes around. So I expect him to start, and I think he can have, a real big impact in the coming games because he's an excellent player. And for me, I've written about that this week, but he's the one who should replace Trent in the team next season. I think he does it in a different way, but definitely good enough for Liverpool to be their starting right back.
Yeah, mix of reaction. Mr. War put in there, if you read the chat, it's like someone has died. It does seem to be a bit of a doom and gloom around this morning. And I suppose a couple of final things for the West Ham game. Most of the positions are defined. Do you think Jota is the one that's going to get a run at number 9? Because like you said, no one's really established himself. But do you think it is the case that Jota's going to keep the shirt till the end of the season?
Yeah, I would say so. I think there's just not enough chances for others to kind of state the claim now. And I think Jota scored and I thought played well against Everton. I mean, if he bags that chance against Fulham, you're kind of saying, okay, well, he's done what he's there to do. It's a good save, that one in the end. But look, I would completely accept, and I think every Liverpool fan would maybe say the same, is that it's not perfect in that number 9 position. It hasn't been all season. And it won't be until Liverpool make a change there. But I also think that kind of emphasises what an incredible job Arne Slot has done. He hasn't had a nailed-on number 9 all season, and yet he's going to win the league. I think that's incredible. That he's masked so many of the flaws in this team for such a long time is an achievement. It's incredible what he's done really to get Liverpool to where they are at this moment. And so, it's definitely enough to get Liverpool over the line. But it's not perfect. Jota's not going to turn into the absolute perfect number 9 in these coming games. There's still going to be issues with him getting bullied off the ball and not helping Liverpool get up the pitch. But you hope that he's going to bag enough goals between now and the end of the season to get Liverpool there, and I'm sure he will. So I think he's going to, he is at the moment basically the best of a bad or best of an imperfect bunch really in that number 9 position. But that should be good enough to get Liverpool over the line. So I think he will be the one who keeps the shirt between now and the end of the season. Yeah.
And I do want to kind of finish it on a positive, which has been sort of against the current a little bit with what's in the chat panel. But we are people 11 points clear. I mean, literally, if you look at those next 3, David, we're jumping ahead now, but West Ham at home, Leicester away, and at home against the Spurs side, we'll have the Conference League, as their focus now. I'm not saying they were absolutely, because we picked like Southampton, and I get that, and Ipswich again at home. But as fixtures go, it is right to think Liverpool should probably be expected to take 9 out of 9, and that pretty much does it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a very kind-looking run, isn't it? I mean, you always fancy Liverpool to win the home games, so, those feel like real positives to get in front of the Anfield crowd, and they will be really helpful as well, really desperate to kind of get this over the line as soon as possible. And then, of course, Leicester away is about as much as a gimme as you can kind of expect. They've been so poor this season, so it would be a shock if they were anything otherwise when Liverpool go there. So it looks kind on paper now. And, you say about Fulham, that could always have been a tough one. I mean, their form had been a bit up and down actually going into it, but equally, they'd drawn with Arsenal there, hadn't they? I think they'd beaten Newcastle. They've had some really good results at home this season, so it can always happen. And if you have an off day, which Liverpool did, you can get beat. But these look a lot kinder, I think. And yeah, I think if they win 3 out of 3 there, there's possibly an Arsenal stumble in there somewhere as well. You could even see the league wrapped up in the next 3. So we'll see how that goes. But it does look a kind enough fixture list, and we shouldn't be. We can't always just get wrapped up in the idea that the last result tells you everything about Liverpool, and this is just how it is. Sometimes you go through runs where you don't win games, or you can lose a game like Fulham if things don't go for you. So I'm pretty sure we'll see plenty of decent performances between now and the end of the season, plenty of wins, and that league getting wrapped up soonish.
And there we go, ladies and gents. Yes, it was defeat against Fulham. Yes, the first half wasn't the best. You can accept all those things. But the Reds are still 11 points clear. Bradley and Alisson should be back. There should be plenty to look forward to. And when you're 11 points clear and when you've got the fixtures it is a sense of when, not if. So there's plenty to look forward to this coming week as well. All that leaves me to say as ever is, David, for the time, the insight, and batting against the tide on tiredness, it is much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
And ladies and gents, that was another Media Matters for Anfield Index.